should have it ready. Here we go. Hello everyone. We should be live. Actually, can you say something? Hold on. Jeez.
Do you need me to go in the broadcast?
Yes.
There we go.
Okay, it should be using the application capture, so it shouldn't be doing no notifications anymore. Hello everyone. We should be live. Can you hear us?
Hello, hello.
Let me know if the audio levels are good.
Is my voice music to your ears?
Oop, there we go. Hello. Hello, Jake.
Oh, I like this chat. It makes little popping noises when people chat.
Oh, I have it off. I think.
I think it's cute.
I know it's late. I'm sorry. Time zones are difficult. No, he's going to sleep.
No, I'm saying just wake up. It's that easy.
This is already working out, but he needs to go to sleep.
They need to be more awake. Wake up
just don't sleep ever. Solves all the issues. If only. So should have people coming in. Hello everyone. Oh my god, the popping sound is your mouth. Hello. Hello Raiden, hello Bobcat. Hello Ruby. Hello Grand.
Hello.
Just waiting for a few people to kind of pile in, and then we can like officially start. Make sure I also have I have the stream. Everything should be going. I made like some changes since last time, based on like things that happened and your feedback. Everybody should be in broadcast. I have the capture thing. So it only captures the Resonite audio, so like you should be hearing like, you know, my Discord notifications and stuff like that. Let me also check Resonite up. And also like we have like, I placed the camera here with the sports, like, you know, in case I do any drawing, so it's a little bit more like legible. So hopefully it should be kind of better like this time around. So hello everyone and welcome to the Resonance. This is a podcast that's / office hours. Where you are free to ask any questions about Resonite, whether it's technical, whether it's, you know, philosophical about like, you know, the platform's nature, whether it's like, you know, anything to do with the team, anything with the platform, or even just technology in general. If you are, you know, interested how the platform is going, like, you know, what is driving the development, how things are going lately, and so on. I'm here, like, you know, to answer questions. I also have my co-host Syra. We're gonna be, you know, having some kind of back and forth on some of the topics as well. So there's a number of like different things, like, you know, like we can go over. My goal is to kind of like, you know, to essentially, focus on your questions first, but like once there's, you know, a little bit more space, we're gonna, you know, just kind of talk about Resonite, talk about like more kind of general, broader topics, because we want to give you, you know, both kind of answers to like very specific questions, but also, you know, sort of the bird's eye view of like, you know, what Resonite is and where it's heading. One thing, if you want to ask questions, make sure to put a question mark at the end of it. That makes it pop up on our pinned messages kind of thing. We're using Jack, the Fox author's version of it. So it kind of makes it, you know, easy for us to like catch the questions, you know, when this chat is like going by really fast. The aim for the stream is similar to last time, 1 to 2 hours, depending on how many questions we get. So we'll kind of like, you know, play it by ear, see like, you know, how much kind of like engagement there is. And yeah, so kind of let's look at the questions, show them on camera. So with that, let's get started. So first, actually, this is kind of interesting question. So Bobcat is asking, any plans on getting rid of the corruption in your team? That's kind of very loaded question, because I don't know like what you mean, like, you know, by corruption. If you believe there is some kind of issue with the team, we do have tools for that. you can make a moderation report even against team members. So if you think there's something wrong, if you think like, there's some kind of like problem, you have the tools, to like make sure like we are informed. If you make a claim against any of the team members, that goes directly to both me and Canadian Git. So we can investigate those things. But one thing you do need to make sure, if you do make that kind of claim, that you provide actual evidence. Because whenever we deal with moderation things, we are very evidence-based. We are gonna see, like, essentially what we have provided. We're gonna evaluate how credible the evidence is and make, decisions based on that. So if you do have like issue with somebody on the team, please make a report. That's as much as I can say, like, on this, like on the stream. So I'm gonna mark those. So far we don't really have actually like too many questions. So like, I guess like we can just talk about stuff, which we didn't really get to like super much last time because we had like lots of questions. So it was pretty much just kind of asking a lot of things. Is there like anything like you would like to talk about, like in general, like like the philosophy of Resonite, stuff like that? Or we can kind of focus more on like how things have been going, because for myself, I've been lately focusing on Photon dust, which is the new particle system for Resonite, and it's part of our big project, of like a big performance upgrade. Oh, we actually have some questions. That's actually they're kind of relevant to us.
Oh my gosh.
Lexevo is asking, I've seen some devlogs from you that Photon dust might not be 100% compatible with the current particle system. What would those features be? I think there's like some like misunderstanding there, because the goal of Photon dust is to essentially have the feature parity with the current particle system, so it has nearly 100% compatibility. Whatever effects you have created with current particle system, they should work with Photon dust. That's it's core part of its design, to be compatible, because one of our philosophies for Resonite is we don't want to break user content where possible. What you might have like been thinking about is during its development, it kind of goes like through stages where I'm sort of like adding more and more features to bring it to feature parity. So at the times of development, when we kind of got asked, I was like, for example, it doesn't support, trailer rendering because that's not implemented yet, but it's something that got implemented, this week. So overall, the system should be like nearly 100% backwards compatible. We might find, some kind of odd behaviors, like during the conversion when testing starts. But right now the aim is like, to get it as close as possible. I don't have like, any kind of specific things. Like my expectation is if we do end up having, kind of backwards compatibility issues, it's mostly going to be certain quirks of behavior that might be hard to fix. But those are kind of hard, they are difficult to figure out before we do the actual testing and put it through its paces and see like all kinds of different particle systems people have. So we'll kind of see, but generally most things should work, or if they're like not 100%, they should be close enough. That's the goal like we aim for. So that should be that one. DJ Prodigy Hunters is asking, how do you want to apply Resonite to education in the future? There's actually a lot of things. Like education was like a topic that's particularly, close to me because I love learning, but I'm very like, self-educated. Like I love like, just kind of like burying myself in a topic and learning and exploring. And the way I view education is that like, ideally, the educational institutions we have like would work very differently, because there's a lot of research showing that the traditional school system kind of goes against how we learn naturally. There's this book called Free to Learn by Peter Gray. He's a psychologist. He researches education, And in his book, he actually compiled a lot of research, some of his own, but like majority of it's like research done by other, psychologists and researchers, studying how do we learn naturally. And there's certain types of schools where the way you learn the schools is like you don't have a fixed curriculum. You don't have fixed classes. You're able to interact, with your peers, whether they're younger or older. You have access to a lot of resources, laboratories, books, lectures, like if whatever you're interested, but like it's kind of up to you to make your own path. And these are called Sudbury Valley type schools. And what I found is those schools, they tend to be, if not better, at least at the same level as the traditional educational system for success, like a career success for people who go through it, and success at universities. So for me, that's sort of free-form education. That's my kind of ideal, and it's one of the reasons I built a place like this, because I want people to have the tools, to explore, experiment, and learn about things. So that's kind of that's kind of the ideal, and the problem is making that sort of drastic change to the educational system. That's nearly impossible. Like the only way you can enact change is through gradual process. So we do have a number universities that utilize Resonite as part of their lectures, and fit it into the more traditional curriculum. There's some also ones that are using it for research, data visualization, building interactive experiences. So that's sort of the more practical way it ends up being applied. But my hope is as it gets applied more, there's going to be more people who come in to just explore, and through the process of exploration itself, they'll be able to learn without even realizing you're learning. You're just making cool stuff and so on. And one of my favorite favorite things I've experienced on this platform is just coming, to a group of users who are relatively young, young people on this platform who have been working on some kind of game, and they're just learning about linear algebra because they needed to make a spaceship fly around. And that for me is the epitome of how people should learn. It's you're I want to build something cool. I'm going to learn linear algebra to do it because it helps me solve the problem. We have that natural drive, to solve a problem. So that to me is one thing I kind of hope that Resonite helps with is make people learn without even realizing they're learning something just by enjoying the platform. But it is kind of complex thing, so I think I'm gonna cap it on here, because otherwise I could end up rambling about this, for a while.
I will say that I agree with that philosophy though, because I actually learned a lot of my math skills and stuff from playing stuff like Gary's Mod and whatever. But instead of making a video game, I might have been learning trigonometry to make props fly around and hit people in the head.
Yeah. So next we have actually hold on, I need to hold on, I'm just gonna reposition myself because I'm standing right behind the fan of my laptop and I'm why is it so hot over here? There we go. So the next question is from Fuzzy Bipolar Bear. What's the next focus after particles? So after particles, once the system is done, there's essentially two big systems that need to be moved full into Froox engine, so we can we can eventually pull Froox engine out of Unity and run it with .NET 9. And one of those is the particle system, which is I think the bigger one, which is kind of why I tackled it first. The second one is the sound system. So likely after particle system is done, I might do a small kind of intermission project and just to kind of refresh a little bit. But the next big part I'm going to be working on is the sound system. Cyro here actually helped me with a part of it, implementing a library called SoundPipe, specifically a component called Zeta Reverb, because we need to essentially move the audio system into our completely own, system. So like it doesn't have like dependency on Unity. With that, we need to implement a lot of the features. Fortunately, there's not too many. One of them, the audio spatialization, that's done by Steam Audio. And Steam Audio, that's open source, so we can make our own integration with it. But one thing that's missing is like, the reverb zones. And Cyro has like spent a lot of work preparing work. So like once the time comes, the system for reverb is like, already ready. So there's gonna be like this. To answer the question in a short manner, there might be like, intermission, some smaller project, but then doing the sound system.
Am I allowed to ask questions?
Yes.
How will we handle the various Unity plugins that we use, like Leap Motion and stuff?
So that's actually going to be part of the Unity integration. I don't actually know like the specifics on that one. Also, I saw comments that your microphone is a little bit quieter, so I'm gonna bump it a bit. There we go. It should be a bit better. So yeah, it's one of those things, usually kind of decide at the point, because there's two ways to go about it. One is we essentially move like, the Leap Motion integration into the process, into like Froox engine, because like Unity doesn't need to know about it.
Yeah.
So like we can just, have like direct integration, just use the library. I think that's probably the way I would go with that one. The other one is like, we still run that with like in Unity, and we just send the data over IPC, which is a little bit more complicated. So I think we're less likely to do that. For a few of the components, like for example, VR inputs, we'll probably have to do that, but Unity, sends the data, because those are very integrated with, with the actual VR rendering. But for everything that's not, not tied to the renderer, we'll probably just move it directly, to Froox engine. So like Unity is not even gonna know that there's a Leap Motion, because it doesn't really need to.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. But a lot of these things, like, we should kind of like figure out like when we get kind of, close to the wire, and be like, what's the best way to kind of handle this one.
Okay.
As Erasmus is saying, project-based learning, task, explore options, execute. Yes. Yeah, I do like project-based learning. It's, you can, especially if it's a project you care about, because it gives you the internal drive to like, want to learn something. Because often it's like, I had this thing happen like, several times when I was, in elementary school and secondary school. I would already be like, making my own games at that point. And we would have like mathematics lessons, and I remember like we were learning, trigonometry stuff. And I remember like one of the classmates being like, why are we learning this? What is this for? It's just, circles and triangles. And the teacher was just like, if you don't want to learn it, then go home and I'll write you an absence. And it was like, I was kind of sad, because like I was already using trigonometry, to make games, because it's very useful for that. And I kind of wished, the teacher would say something like that, like, be like, you could use this for this, you can use it for that, because I feel that it would have like given like, more motivation, like to like learn this kind of stuff, because a lot of my classmates, they actually went to the same secondary school because they were interested, in programming. They wanted to make their own games. And, like, instead of it, they were just kind of told, like, you have to learn it because it's on curriculum. And it's like, not really good kind of like motivation. But yeah, like, I do agree. Project-based education's like, I feel superior, like, just learning things just because you have to. So next, Glavin VR is asking, are there plans to do further developments to the leg animation system? I know people are still upset about it and want behavior to look and feel better than the current configuration can't fix. I would love to show what features we'd like to see added that would really do a lot to make people feel a lot more comfortable with new animations. It's also much easier to show than to type it in text. What I would recommend like for that one is like, make like some videos and, share those with us. Usually when we work on those kinds of things, well, pretty much like anything, like we don't do, like where you show us the bug in game, because one, it makes it like, like usually when we hop on, we're just, we go off the work mode. So it's kind of like, like we don't like do too much work, but it's not like super manageable for us, because when we work on something, we need like to have materials. Usually like I do the thing like where I have like, my materials to work on something on one screen. I kind of like look over them, I analyze them, I work on stuff, I look over them, and I'm kind of like, constantly referencing them. So having those materials kind of like ready like that, or even better yet, having a replication object. Whenever you like, submit something and you have a reliable way of like, triggering that undesirable behavior, and you send us like, some kind of replication object or mechanism, that helps a lot. Like you have no idea how much that helps. Because if you do that, I can, for example, run, I can run like, Resonite with like a debugger attached, or I can, instrument the code with a bunch of diagnostics and everything. I run the replication, I'll be like, that's why that happens. But when you just kind of see it, it makes it very difficult, especially when you kind of like, reliably replicate it, because there's, like whenever like I see something, like there's been so many times where I see like something happen, there's like a bug, there's like an issue, and by the time I, get out of VR, it's the next day, and I have to like, work on stuff, I've already forgotten about it. So like we do need to kind of, it doesn't have to be text, like the text can be just kind of basic, description, but we kind of need something that's, pen on paper, to put it that way. So we can able to work with it. But to answer the general question, yes, we generally kind of open to work on any kind of like, systems. So if there's like, want for it, we can like invest more time into it. Right now the question is, how much time do you want us to invest, into this particle system? Do you feel there's problems that are like, significant enough that you would want us to pause, work on the performance optimizations to address those issues, even though it's gonna make, the performance update delayed? Because there's only so many things we can kind of work on the time. So like, if it's a question, do we delay performance update, say by 2 weeks? What if it's like, by a month? Is that okay? Like, is this something like you'd prefer? Or would you want to address it like, after we do a bit of performance update? There's different kind of ways to go around it. But it's also like, why having those good materials, it kind of helps us, because now instead of, being like, okay, we have to delay it, say by 2 weeks, we only delay it like, by 2 days. And we've had a number of issues like where it literally happens is, like where good quality reporting, good quality materials for us to work with saves us like days, sometimes even weeks of time. And it kind of makes it easier to like, slow these things in. But just like, sorry,
sorry, I didn't mean to interject there for a sec.
Yeah. But in general, like, we're open to it. Like, it just kind of like matters, like what materials we get, because right now, like, we're not really hearing as much, which makes it a little bit kind of, difficult for us to be like, is this something we should prioritize? Should we like delay and like, spend more time like on this and delay the performance update for it? And right now, because like, we're just kind of like hearing things on the grapevine, we don't know, like, is that gonna be, is that like 1 week of work, is this 2 weeks, is that a month? It's very fuzzy. So like having more specifics, that will help.
Yeah. Tangentially, this is kind of why we also require like on like this is kind of like a little bit of an aside on like the GitHub. It's why we require like mandatory logs on when you make like a bug report.
Yes.
Because if we don't have a log, you might think that the bug is simple, but then it turns out to be like a horrifying, rat's nest of finding out where this is actually happening, when we could have seen it in the log, and so it can save hours or days of time.
I had literally like a number of issues where somebody's like, I feel this doesn't need a log, and I look at it and I'm like, I need a log. If I had log, I could have fixed it probably like, within the minute, but now I have to respond. I have to like, put it back, in the mind and be like, okay, I have to deal with this later. And it just kind of, a lot of the things, for the tickets, like we're kind of strict about it, but like the reason for that is like we're very limited on time. So whatever you do on your end to save us time lets us process more like, tickets and issues. And one thing I would want people like to think about is like, think about it like, from the other perspective. Say like you make an issue, you really care about it. And the reason your issue doesn't get addressed is because somebody didn't put as much effort into the issue, and instead of like, it being say 5-minute fix, it took me, 2 hours, and the time I would have otherwise, had to address your issue is now gone, and your issue doesn't get addressed because the other issue, pushed it out of the way. Because this thing actually happens. I've had issues where like I spent hours on it just kind of going down a rabbit hole, and then the person like mentioned something and I'm like, now it's fixed in 5 minutes. I wish I knew that at the start. So that's one of the things like, like I would want everyone to kind of keep in mind. So next we have Erasmus 022. Garry's Mod, Vire Mod, Rocket Everyone's World, Spaceball, anyone? I feel that's kind of like a Cyro thing. I haven't actually played Garry's Mod much. I know like Cyro like did because,
I'm gonna be honest, I haven't actually really played Space Build or anything, but I have used WireMod. I've used WireMod quite extensively. I used like E2. I've used like some people's add-ons like Starfall for it. Like some alternate like coding chips and stuff. I've also used like traditional gate wiring as well, which was pretty fun. It's kind of like Protoflux, where you can like wire up individual like chips that do singular functions together. Pretty neat.
I've like seen like actually like the funny thing is I played like Garry's Mod a little bit after like Resonite because people were saying like it's a little bit like it, but I'm not really familiar with it super much. Next we have question from Lexivo. What's the reasoning for sticking to the LTS versions of .NET, the even version numbers? So we don't really have like how to put it, like I would kind of flip it as like, like why would we stick to it right now? Because upgrading, .NET version, it's pretty much like there's not really anything that kind of breaks. I've upgraded our cloud infrastructure. Was it actually this week? I don't even remember. I'm like weird with time. I think it was at the beginning of this week. I've upgraded our infrastructure to .NET 9, and for the most part, it's just kind of like, a switch. I kind of updated like, some libraries which took a little bit just to kind of bump the version numbers, but it's mostly just kind of like, changing the numbers. And then I had to fix one line of code where a function call was ambiguous because they introduced like, a new overload to function, which was like 10-second fix. And then like, after I pushed it to the cloud, it works, and it actually uses like a fair bit less CPU because they did a lot of performance upgrades. So right now there's not really much of a downside, with upgrading to a newer version of .NET. It's a very quick thing to do as well. Like it literally took less than a day. The main thing that's kind of taking with headless is just kind of giving people time, to like upgrade their tooling. But otherwise, like, it's a very quick process. There's lots of benefits to it. So like, once, .NET 10 comes out, we'll pretty much do the same thing, which you can upgrade the version and, switch shortly after its release. Because there's not really much reason not to. Next question, Darky Sabertooth. When will the platform support 5.1 sound? I'm not sure. That's not like super like on my like. I don't know how much people like kind of use that. If you were to explore that, I don't know how it works, with stuff like Steam Audio. Like I have to kind of investigate. Because we use that, for binaural spatialization, and it works really well with stereo audio, but it's designed for. I don't know how 5.1 sound like would work. Does it support it at all? You know, are there complications? Would you have to disable it? I don't know how many people use, you know, like surround sound like that. So if it's something you're interested in, I recommend making a GitHub issue. We can call it, you know, see like how much interest is in that and how much like, you know, is it worth like, you know, our time? Like, should we invest our time into it? But right now I don't really know. It feels kind of more like it's probably more niche. And it might require like substantial amount of work, so like we might not like, you know, prioritize it, but there's a thing that can always change. You know, we have like a lot of people saying like, you know, I use like 5.1 surround, like oh, this would really help, like, you know, we might end up doing it. Next question. Shadow X, when Froox engine is separated from Unity, will it automatically make it independent when it comes to frames, running at constant 72 FPS while the engine is doing 30, for example, or it will still be locked together? It will still lock together. There's not really... So there's actually an interesting thing that like a lot of people don't know about Froox engine. In the old versions of it, it actually used time slicing to sort of like run asynchronously from Unity. The problem with that is, you essentially like, you know, when you render a new frame, you don't have the scene fully updated with the new state. So like, you know, say like, you know, you're moving your hand or moving your head, that is now running at lower frame rate, but now you're rendering a new position, so like it starts kind of like, you know, jittering around. And depending, you know, how do you split, if you don't have any mechanism to synchronize at all, you can literally get, you know, halved, like, you know, baked updates. And you have absolutely no control, you know, when those happen. Because you essentially, when the engine is, you know, updating the scene, you literally cut it off at a random point, and, you know, you get like a half of a frame update and half like old update, and things, you know, start kind of like jittering around and being inconsistent. So I don't think it's a really good approach for things. It's one of the reasons I actually ended up like removing it, because you literally had like, you know, things just kind of have updating, jittering around, and like it's not really manageable. What I think is much better approach, if you wanna, you know, maintain high frame rate, is one of the things that's on our roadmap for performance, which is variable rate update system. What that will do is that for some components, say like, you know, we have avatars, like, you know, IK, so you have like, you know, things moving in the background. Not everything needs to update at the same rate. Say there's a bunch of people in distance, they're doing stuff, so all their components, you know, their avatars, you know, menus, whatever's, you know, costing CPU time, it only gets updated every second frame, or every third frame, or every fourth frame. And that saves you a lot of performance, but also gives you control. Because your own IK and IK of somebody, you know, who's like next to you, they will still update at full rate. So for example, you know, my IK and Cyrus IK would update at 72, you know, 72 FPS, and somebody who's like in distance, they update, you know, say at 20 FPS, because you don't really need more, like, you know, when you can barely see them. And with that kind of system, you can have it, you know, scale itself based on a certain, you know, target frame rate. So if it sees, okay, like I'm dropping, you know, I have like too much to update each frame, so I'm dropping frame rate, I'm gonna drop, you know, stuff that's in distance to even lower frame rate to save more performance. That way I can still overall hit this, you know, certain like target frame rate. And that way you actually have control where does that kind of slowdown happen? Like where does that, like, you know, lowering frame rate happen, rather than, you know, just having decided by pretty much randomness. So I hope that kind of, you know, answers that.
Probably don't need to answer this next one.
So next we have D1. I don't know how to actually pronounce that name.
I think you pronounce it Diami.
Diami?
Yeah, Diami or Diami, I'm not sure.
Diami is asking, I have seen multiple reviews on your Steam store page, the most recent one by Armor Dragon listing security vulnerabilities and asset ripping being a reason why they can't recommend Resonite. Do you have any plans to address these issues? So there's kind of like two ways, there's like two things here. So like, One of them is you can't prevent asset ripping in principle. Like when you think about it, like in order to be able to display an asset, to be able, for example, so I can see Cyrus' avatar, I need to have the data. And at some point, the data needs to be decoded and decrypted so I can actually see it properly. Usually what rippers do, they will find the point where that decryption happens, they will hook into that and they will extract the data. And the only way to kind of prevent that is not to have the data in decrypted form at all. But if you don't have the data in decrypted form, then you can't see it. And the only thing you can kind of do is make it more difficult, but you pretty much end up like in a space race, space race kind of situation where like you're trying to be one step ahead of the, people who rip things, but you're making things kind of more complicated, and they still eventually, crack it. So I don't believe like, there's, I don't know how much like, is like worth, like how complicated do we want to make it? There's a few things we do want to do that will make it a bit more complicated to get the data out, but I expect, those, if you get somebody with enough drive, they will find a way to get the data. And that applies to every single platform. Like there's no platform that would prevent asset ripping.
Yeah. If it's in your GPU, then like you already have it.
Yeah. So the other side of this is what I think is best approach for this kind of thing is making it more difficult for people to actually use the ripped assets. So we do have a plan to have sort of like a licensing system where you say, I own this texture. You kind of register your ownership of it. And like the system will know this texture belongs to this user. Then if the client sees somebody else using the texture, it's going to check, does this user have permission to use it? If they don't, they will essentially kick them out. So at that point, if people do end up like ripping stuff, it's going to make it much harder for them to like, use it in places because they will have to mod their own clients to, get rid of those protections, but they cannot mod other people's clients. And if we make it, harder for people to exist and actually use the rip stuff, I think that on itself is going to decrease, the drive for people to rip stuff because they cannot really do as much with it. Even then, I don't expect it to be, fully solvable issue. People will probably, start modifying it, so they rip the texture and they modify it just enough so the system doesn't think it's the same one. To kind of bypass the system. So even then, we will likely have to have like, sort of like a moderation system where like you make a report, we have somebody like look and be like, okay, yeah, that's clearly ripped. They, take some action. But having kind of systems in place, that is going to help, usually the rationale is like, it's going to help catch, 90% of the cases. Just automated because 90% of users, they will not want to go to the extra lengths to like figure out how to get around the system, which makes the 10% that we need to deal with, much more manageable. So I would say generally, like if your expectation is that you're not able to like, rip assets at all, there's no software that's ever, gonna fulfill that. If you think about it, think about like big AAA games. They have spent like, hundreds, like dozens or hundreds of millions of dollars developing protections, to like make it so people cannot crack their games, and sell them like, not sell them, just download them illegally. And even those protections, where they spend like, they had like teams of engineers working those, they still get cracked in time. It will be kind of harder, but it's like it's something eventually like you in principle cannot prevent. You can only make it harder, and it just takes somebody with drive to get around it. So I hope that kind of, you know, answer the question, give you like a little bit more kind of insight, you know, into stuff like we kind of plan with that stuff. But it's ultimately, you know, we cannot promise you that we'll be able to prevent every single instance of ripping. And if any platform does, they're probably misleading you. So I'm gonna, you know, kind of put it that way.
We can address, you know, they also mentioned like security vulnerabilities.
Oh yeah, security. Yeah, if you do know of security vulnerabilities, please make a report on our moderation system. We have a specific type of ticket for security vulnerabilities, so we do need details about those. If there's actual, you know, severe security vulnerability, we will address it as soon as we can. We do need like solid data. We do get a lot of like reports where somebody is like, you know, I think there's a security vulnerability, but they don't really give us much information. And then we're not able to like, you know, really do much about it because it's too vague to act on. And the unfortunate side of that is, you know, that like people then go like, you know, oh, we're not addressing security vulnerabilities, but you're pretty much not giving us, you know, enough data to kind of work on them. So it's kind of, it's a tricky kind of situation. But if you do make a good report, like, you know, I promise like we look at it and we will evaluate it. There's like some things where you get information and somebody like this is security vulnerability, but we're like, this doesn't actually classify as security, like it's literally just a bug. That doesn't really let you exploit, like, you know, much. Like it doesn't let you, you know, steal somebody's data or run, you know, some remote code. Stuff like, you know, that would be like really severe. It can like actually affect the security of your PC, your data, or your private information. So next, Skyven Kitsune is asking, are there plans to make more editor-like features for desktop mode in the future? Yes, kinda. So generally, our approach to like designing tools and interfaces for Resonite is make them sort of like desktop VR agnostic. Like for example, think about, you know, inspector windows. You can use them both in desktop and you can use them, you know, in VR. They're not designed, you know, for one or the other. What I really want us to do to kind of make it easier on desktop is do stuff like that's built around these tools. So for example, on desktop, you know, you'll be able to like split your window, add, you know, extra panel, and you know, and that panel is just gonna show a particle inspector in the scene. So you have both your scene view and your inspector, and you can move around, and you can also interact with the inspector, or you can, you know, split it even more, like, you know, kind of like in Blender. So adding tools like that. You know, another thing is like when I add like, you know, kind of like facets, so you can have like, you know, for example, quick ways to switch, you know, tools, like, or like modes of different tools. Adding stuff like that that's sort of built around it and makes it easier to use in desktop. I think that's, you know, the direction we're gonna go in, to make it easier to use Resonite on desktop. So next, in other words, you guys like good reports via GitHub. So actual security. Oh, say again, please.
I was just saying, I think that was in reference to the locomotion.
Oh, yeah, there was like a question that seemed to be in chat. I just kind of skipped it. So Rasmus is asking, in other words, you guys like good reports via GitHub. Security reports, we actually ask you file, if you think it's actually severe security issue, we ask that you report it via the moderation system. We have a specific like type of ticket that you select for it. Just in case, you know, it's something, if you put it on GitHub, it's public, which means people can know, you know, this is a thing and they can use it to exploit things before we have a chance to fix it. So if you do find an issue like that, it's more responsible to file it, like, you know, with that system. If it's just a bug, you know, or another issue, then report it on GitHub. But yes, like we do get a fair amount of like reports that are not really including the things we need, which in turn makes it, you know, harder for us to address those issues, or even like, you know, kind of evaluate them. Glavin's asking, keep in mind that GitHub's an option for most of the user base, so there would be, where would be the best place to give feedback? Would the Resonite Discord work or a ticket on the Resonite website? So right now, GitHub is unfortunately the only option we have. We don't have like any other like tooling for like reporting things. We do want to introduce more options, so you can report things in game. However, that takes development time, which like right now is focused mostly on the performance update. So right now, GitHub's unfortunately like your main option. You could you could like report it like on Discord and ask somebody to make an issue with it. That's what some people do, where you essentially ask a friend, be like, can you file this issue, on my behalf? We sometimes get GitHub issues like that, so that's one option you could use. Tickets on the Resonite website, like they're generally for moderation and security issues, so don't use those for that purpose. But yeah, like unfortunately, right now GitHub is the only thing we have. We do want to add more options, but that it takes time. Next, we have Mr. Daboop 123456. So what's the issue with switching between Steam Link and tracking and Quest controllers? Issue 3066. As far as I can tell, there's a bug in Unity where when I looked at the crash, whenever you switch controllers, it calls like a function to get the features of the device, like the newly connected device. Because the way the switching is implemented, like in Steam Link, is a little bit odd for my taste. It's essentially tells you, oh, those Quest controllers you have disconnected. There's new Quest controllers that have connected, and the Quest controllers are actually your hands. And when you switch back, it's like, oh, those Quest controllers have disconnected. These controllers are connected again. So it's kind of swapping them back and forth. And there seems to be a bug in Unity where whenever a device gets connected, it essentially tries to like fetch a list of its features, and there's some kind of memory corruption that happens there. Unfortunately, because this bug happens inside of Unity, is difficult to fix because one, we don't have access to Unity source code, so we kind of like only work of like debug symbols. We cannot modify the source code to fix the issue, so we can only find like ways to work around it. And there's like one thing I wanted to try, see if we can actually like disable the XR support in Unity for the controllers and use this Steam one, but I don't know if it depends on it, so it kind of needs it needs more kind of investigation. But I don't know what the root cause is. I know like what happened, like I know from the crash reports what happens at the time of the crash, but there's probably more to it. Dusty Sprinkles, Fruit Loops. What is your most personally desired silly feature? Well, it depends how you define silly. Right now I would say Gaussian spotting, because I've been kind of playing with them quite a bit. So I don't know if it classifies as silly though. What would a silly feature be?
Silly features.
Because it is like useful feature. I think like silly feature would be like one that's like just it doesn't have any purpose. It's just goofy.
Oh, it's hard to think of silly features because I'm usually very pragmatic. So I'm
Yeah,
like,
same.
I only want things that are useful.
Yeah.
What would be silly?
I mean, there's April Fool's ones. I'm gonna go with that. I have a list of things I want to do for April Fools just to kind of be silly. So probably one of those. I kind of look forward like the next April Fools, because one thing we kind of did in the past is like we had a bunch of like April Fool's things where some things were kind of just goofy, but it confused people. Like they were like, oh, there's a bug with like this thing. So they were like, oh no, this is not a bug, it's April Fools. So it was it was a little bit problematic, but my approach for April Fools is like, since we have the new settings UI and it's very easy to add things to it, we're just gonna on the April Fools, there's just gonna be some mysterious settings, and if you toggle them on, something's gonna happen. And if that something is interfering with your work, just turn it off. So that's probably the way we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
We didn't get to do it this year because the settings UI was still in progress.
I think it would be really funny to have an option that just makes all of your, if we whenever we had rigid body physics or whatever, just makes all of your protoflux wires sag and
oh my god.
needles.
Okay, that's going on the list. I need to write this down. Actually, can you send me a message on Telegram? I'm gonna add it to the list.
Yeah.
You might get saggy protoflux nodes on April Fools. So Ozzy saying, is that John? I love Sweep Syro.
Yeah, it's me. I'm John. I love Sweep Syro. You know me. That's my middle name. I love
sweeping,
and there's definitely no problems when counting.
just gotta sweep with those physics brushes.
Yeah.
So next, Skyrim Kitsune. Are there plans to make advanced permission systems, something in the style of Second Life? I'm not super familiar with Second Life, so upfront I can't comment on this part. But one of the things we do plan adding is a hard permission system, which is going to be a way to essentially restrict, who can modify which parts, of the data model. And it's going to be sort of on the low level where you say this is literally read-only unless, you exist in the specific kind of group. So that will provide much more robust, security for things. So even if you have people who use, modded clients and other things, they'll not be able to get around it because it's going to be, fully verified at the data model level at the host. There's other things for example, we're going to add systems so you can add certain limits, how much geometry, texture data, how many slots can user bring into the data model, so you can kind of prevent people from just spamming stuff. There's probably going to be other kind of interactions, can they, for example, if user say spawns something that has a node which applies, say force to the user, are they actually allowed to apply force to other users or on themselves? The system will track, this node was, belongs to this user doesn't have the permission, with others. It's also gonna, track things if the user makes, the node spawn on another user, it's still gonna know, okay, this is being spawned by something that this user brought in, therefore it's still theirs, even though technically another user spawned it. So there's gonna be a system like that at some point. I don't know how it compares to Second Life. It's probably gonna be a one-to-one because Resonite works fairly differently. I think we were gonna mention a little bit more with the Second Life part.
Oh yeah. I think they're also talking about things no edit, no copy or whatever, where you can own a thing, but you can't copy it and give it out to other people, or you can own it or you can't open the code for it or something like that.
Yes. So that would be more with the licensing system, for the items. So you can you can have a thing in a world, but for example, you cannot save it, unless you get a permission to. So there's multiple things because permissions is kind of broad thing. And it's not actually going to be a single system that's going to deal with all of the issues. There's going to be multiple of them designed for different kind of use cases. So, but yeah, both of those should come at some point. Grand UK is asking, when Froox engine is separate from the renderer, will there be any opposition to custom render clients? I mean, generally, I would say there's not really much opposition. The only thing is making a custom render client is a lot of work, especially if you want to support all the content. So I don't personally see super much benefit in making a completely custom one, because that's probably at the very least months of work, and you would essentially have to make one that works very similarly. Otherwise, all the content would be broken. So like if people's like, content doesn't work with a, custom render client, then, like I feel like they would have like not really much drive to use it. So what I think like is more likely to happen is like, where people mod it, add extra effects, add extra things and so on, which, I feel it happens already, people like mod the client. So in general, kind of like just don't have like a position. The only worry with things like that I would have is like if it ends up, kind of fragmenting the community and fragmenting the content, where you have like, a lot of people relying on particular like render client, but then like, they cannot like use or view stuff from the other one. So like people end up like, split up in different versions, and you have like, and you end up like with very few people on each. So that's pretty much the only worry I can kind of think of like with that kind of stuff. Next we have Rasmus 0211 is asking, this alludes to official performance options. Thinking something performs simple performance evaluation might be worth considering. So when you say performance options, to me that sounds like settings for performance, but also like the second part of the question sounds like sort of profiling tools, so you can find how much performance something takes. So for the performance options, we do already have like some, like you can go like to your settings, and there's a number of graphics options. You can restrict the size of textures and things like that, which helps with performance, particularly on devices with less VRAM, for example. There's probably going to be more as we kind of go in. We also do want to add certain tools, for performance profiling at some point, so you can measure, how things, how long things take and optimize your content. So there's definitely going to be like, eventually you want to have both. Next we have check the Froox filter. Currently, there's a bit of practical limit to world session sizes. Whatever plans to allow people to scale up their world's experience in the future? I'm thinking similar to Second Life has massive connected landmass. Yes. So there's a big plan, sort of like a reward the data model of Resonite, and instead of like just the world being the thing you're in, is gonna be something like called a domain. And the domain can have like a bunch of stuff in it. It can be like the world, but each of the domains can actually exist with others. You can sort of like position multiple domains next to each other, or like pretty much any way like relative to each other. With Second Life, we have like the grid system, and my goal is to have a system that's a lot more generalized. So instead of just being able to do a grid, you can you could literally have a session that's this tiny like building, and you put it on a desk, and that's on its own session that's embedded in this bigger session. Or maybe you have a big kind of spaceship, and inside of the spaceship is another world, another domain, another session essentially. And that ship itself, like the whole session, can travel to other sessions. So you could have it, join here, and there's a bunch of people inside, and they can step out, they're going to be belong into the session, or you can step into the spaceship, and then you're going to load into the session inside, and then you fly away. So you, or you could like, you can pretty much like, position them in any way you want relative to each other. You can have like, small ones, you can have like big ones. So you can like, go everything to like micro level, you can go like, to space level, or you can, or you can just arrange a bunch of sessions, in a grid, or you can like, say you have a friend, so you have your sessions next to each other, and technically each one's separate, and you can just move between them spatially. So that's kind of the overall goal for having like, really big worlds, but also like ones where have a little more flexibility. Oh yeah, I also see like, thinking of TARDIS. That's the next example, like you can have inside of the TARDIS be actually another session, and then like whenever you like, you travel to other sessions, you step in and out, like you essentially have like two sessions coexisting. We already have like, some plumbing for that, because with Resonite you can be in multiple worlds, and you can, switch between them, and the, the dash, and like, like your facets and so on, they're technically another session too that runs on top of other sessions. So this is sort of like, taking that concept and extend it like, way further.
Yeah. That kind of makes me think of like a cool thing where you could like have you could have like a door, right? And then you come out and now you're suddenly like tiny on the table, but it's another session.
Yeah, like you could literally have like a session as a physical thing. You can go into other ones, or you can be like, I have built this world, that's a big world, and maybe there's a little tavern that's tiny, and I have to scale down and go in there, and the inside is actually another session, and people can join that session directly, or they can enter it physically, and they can also leave it like by going out, and the system kind of handles it kind of like semi-transparently for you. And I feel like that can be like a really cool way to kind of approach things. They're asking in the chat. Shadow is asking at Jagged Fox, are you talking about physical size, floating point precision limit, or performance issues? So I can actually add a little bit more context for this one. The reason to to handle things with domain is because it helps with the floating point precision limit, because each of the sessions, each of the domains is relatively small-ish, and when you actually cross to another one, you still the floating point values stay within smaller range where they're more precise, but you have extra information on top that says you're in the session and the session is this position relative to this other one, so it kind of ends up working out, and it kind of handles the coordinate transformations when stuff transfers between the two of them. It also helps with performance issues, because you can kind of dynamically load them in and unload them as needed. Plus the other channel performance improvements that will help as well. Slider Floof is asking, under the user inspector, there's a section called access key. I'm wondering what actually does it. Only shows up for users of a host if the host doesn't have its own key. Some few people have already decompiled and said it was just simple avatar protection for the host to spawn in your avatar. Not sure how true that is, though kind of what's inside that. I don't feel like I understand the last part, but I can tell you it has nothing to do with simple avatar protection. It has to do with accessing your private data, on your own account. So when you load into the session, typically the host will spawn your avatar for you. In order to do that, you actually need to access data from your account, specifically that avatar, to be able to access it. So what do we do? Because we don't want, when you save your avatar and you set it as favorite, we don't want it to be accessible at any time by anyone. Because then people could just spawn your avatar in, even though it is an avatar protection, they can still access that record through API. So what Resonite does, it is a system where even if it's something private, when you join a session, you generate an access key that gives one-time access to that specific record, which is your avatar, to the host. The host then uses that key to access the data so they can load in the avatar for you. And what it does is, it makes sure that access is given, only to host, specifically at the time when you join the session, and only one time. Which means even after you leave, or even when you're in the session, they can no longer, access it again. So this kind of gives the host ability to spawn your avatar while severely restricting, when they can actually access it, making sure they cannot abuse that access. Or at least not as easily. Granny K is asking, is there any intentions on moving the issues from GitHub to the Resonite website as more integrated solution with our Resonite accounts and making it easier to report issues and bugs and crashes? So we don't actually have intention to move it to website. We're very likely gonna keep using GitHub because it's integrated with our development tools. GitHub is very optimized for developer work. So we need that to kind of stay as simple as possible so we can, manage as many issues. Plus, we would have to implement our own system, for bug reporting, which, do you want us, to spend, several months on that, which we then cannot spend on other things. What we probably gonna do, the in-game bug reporting is actually gonna be tied to the GitHub, which is gonna present our own interface for it. So you're not gonna need to register a GitHub account, and you just use your Resonite account, and essentially like when you make the report, it's gonna make the GitHub issue for you. And it's going to make sure to include all the data and everything. Same thing like when we view the issues, it's going to be like a front end for GitHub. So that's the most likely way we're going to go about it. We'd really don't want because making your own system for like reporting things, like it's substantial amount of effort. So we would rather like keep using tools that are already there, that are well integrated with tooling, and just provide a simpler interface for everyone and kind of build automation around it. Also, thank you for the subscription, Juan V. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Also, Zelio TF is asking, is that Gmod on a Scholar? Oh, yes.
Yes, it's Gmod on my
It's
camera.
Gmod. Do I show it on camera?
Oh yes. I have a little, since I'm from Gary's Mod, I always have this around my neck. It
rattles.
Yeah, it does rattle if you shake it enough. That's actually just some like key. That's actually kind of funny. Is the sound for it? I've never changed. And when the mic tip first came out, like the microphone tool, I just jingled some keys in front of the mic, and now it is forever that noise.
Yeah. You make all the assets on here. As
Yeah.
intended.
Yeah.
So next, Rasmus. Also, thank you, Darky, and Shadow Loop as well for a subscription too. Thank you. So next, we have a question for Rasmus. 0211. To all people's sakes, I know you're switching to Lumberyard after no Lumberyard. There's like a weird thing like about Lumberyard is like I've like talked to like few other game developers about it where we're like when it came out like it was this huge news, they have both rights to CryEngine, like they're making it free, you can use it, like it's this big engine and like it's gonna rival like Unity and Unreal and whatnot, and now it's like Lumberyard. I vaguely remember that. Like it's kind of interesting because like I feel like you don't hear much about it, and from what I've heard from people who work with it, it's kind of weird. But yeah, like we wouldn't. I don't think it's like a good fit for us, but like there's lots of reasons why we probably wouldn't do it. Next we have. I'm actually gonna delete these as well, the subscriptions. Glitch4 is asking, why is Froox cute? So the reason is I'm coated with a cuteness retroreflective surface that's actually taking Glitch's cuteness and is reflecting it back at you. So there's the official answer. Like it's in fact your own cuteness that's being, reflected. It's similar to it's similar to retroreflective surfaces, like the coating used for signs, so like very bright and so on. Except instead of the electromagnetic spectrum, it like reflects cuteness.
Yeah, and it actually like the apparent like resplendent cuteness that appears to be radiating off of Froox is actually a well-known physical phenomenon that is often misconceived as him radiating his own cuteness, when in reality it is in fact being reflected from Glitch.
Yes. So there we have it. Officially answered, on the Resonite stream. Now this is, part of history. You got your answer.
Yep.
So it actually kind of clears all the questions we had. Like if you got any more, feel free to send them. But I guess it's 1 hour and 10 minutes in, so like we can also get into a little bit of ramblings, I guess.
Ramble.
So like I was gonna talk a bit about the new particle system the Photon dust. It's because in part because it's pretty much what I've been spending most of my time on. And we got a bunch of questions. Darky, did you know about your hype train? Yes, thank you for the hype train. We got a hype. So now I don't know if I should if I should like let some questions accumulate or ramble. I'm gonna ramble a little bit.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because so with the photon dust, it's getting very close. Like I've this week I have implemented a trail system, and you can do lots of like cool things with it. You can essentially, you can have trails, you can have ribbons between particles, and overall, like pretty much like what's remaining right now. I need to kind of like polish up a few things, make sure like because I think there's a bug like when you actually delete it, it crashes the world. So I need to check why. It's probably something dumb, but also thank you for the donation, Darky, for the bits, for the 20 bits. I need to make sure it doesn't explode. It kind of clears, like, clears things properly. There's also like few things like, for example, changing the coordinate space of the particles, but I already know how I'm gonna do it. It's relatively simple to do. And then I need to write a conversion system for it. But one of the things I really enjoyed, like, I really love particle systems because in general, because in principle, they're pretty simple systems where with like relatively few parameters, you can create such a variety of effects. And it makes them really fun, like, to play and mess around with. We're just kind of moving toggles and changing values, and it does, this thing, and then like completely changes the behavior. And it's it's like, I know it's just like fun. And one of the things like working on it is because we now control like the whole simulation, essentially from the emission to the actual simulation, updating all the updating all the points, all the properties, doing whatever with them, and we just kind of submit the finished like positions and colors like to Unity to render out. Like, do you know like that Thanos meme, like the I can make reality can be whatever I want it to be?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm quoting it exactly. I'm going to be paraphrasing, but essentially that's how it felt, because I've added a few modules that like the current system doesn't have. Like for example, turbulence module, or made like a thing where you can split the ribbon, based on like when you emit particles, they can be connected with a ribbon, and if you pause the emission for a bit and then start it again, it's gonna be its own ribbon. So you can have like connected kind of streaks of like particles. Or there's like, ones that change the color in the, hue saturation value, like color space, so it can, cycle through the rainbow. And those things are like, like it's not something we support right now with the current particle system, because it'll be really hard to implement, because Unity handles like big part of our simulation, but now it's like trivial. So I want this kind of effect. 5 minutes and I have a module that does it. So like you were mentioning, you wanted like a 3D texture that like lets you like specify what's the word, like turbulence. Yeah,
turbulence.
And it's so simple to add with a new system, because like all I do is add a module. Each module, like it essentially gets told, please update this chunk of particles, and I can do whatever with it. So I can be like, okay, I'm gonna read the current particle position, I'm gonna compute coordinates for texture, I'm gonna read the color, I'm gonna remap it to like a vector, I'm gonna update the velocity, done. And it runs multi-threaded. It's super fast and it's like super simple to implement, and that's like one of the like really exciting things. It's just like having full control over it and being able to add like lots of like new cool effects. And it's one of the reasons I've added a few of them that like we don't need technically for MVP, but they were so simple to add. I was like, I'm just gonna do it because it brings more kind of fun into it, and it kind of helps me kind of verify the design, make sure this kind of works, and it makes for kind of cool showcases. Plus when we release it, like like it supports pretty much all the things that all systems supported, but here's a bunch of extra stuff, so it's not just like like, oh, we just released a new particle system, oh, it does all the same things the old one does and nothing extra. So it makes things a little more exciting, more fun, and it's like one of the things I've been kind of happy with.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it, especially especially like the like doing turbulence and stuff, because that's just something I've
Oh yeah.
always wanted to do for like magic particles, right?
Oh
And
yes.
being able to make them like flow
Go.
around things. Like you just have never been able to make things
Yeah.
flow around stuff, and now you will be able to.
One of the big things that I also want to add, but this one actually I'm saving after MVP, is adding like an effector system. So you can, for example, say like, I can be like, okay, here I have a sphere. Actually, do I have a, is there a tool? I can just yoink this tool, come on. So I can be like, oh, here's a sphere. Whatever particles inside of this volume of this sphere, it's gonna, accelerate, or it's gonna slow down, or it's gonna get turbulent. And there's gonna be other one which is gonna do this, and maybe this one sends particles, accelerates them this way. But so like, oh, why this physical?
Oh, sorry, I hit him with the.
Oh, I see. I was like switching, so I don't remember changing them. But yeah, like, but that system's a little bit more complicated, because what we need to do, we're gonna use Beppu physics for that and build sort of like acceleration structure. So each particle can be like, when we're simulating each particle, so you have a particle here, it's gonna be like, are there any effectors at this point in space? And you have lots of particles, so you want it to be a really efficient sort of physics system, like the sum of the actual acceleration structures from Beppu physics. They're particularly well suited for that, like very sort of pre-compute data, and it makes it very efficient to sample what's in each point in space. But because that's a bigger system that needs to be added, I'm saving that after MVP. But it's also something that's gonna come eventually. It's not that difficult, but it has more. The other one I want to add is like sub-emitters, and it's something we actually get asked for a lot. But also, like, I need to add a mechanism for one simulation to sort of depend on the other one, because when it requires to add, like, ordering to the simulation, because we have to be like, okay, this simulation needs to run first, so we can figure out its emissions and then feed it and simulate this other one. Right now, if you have multiple simulations in the world, it essentially just schedules them to happen, like whatever order, like the multi-threading system processes them. But for the sub-emitters, we need to add, like, a way for them to kind of, be like, okay, I've simulated, like, I finished my simulation, I'm gonna, send my data to the other one. But also saving that after MVP. I'll see, like, if I can just, like, do a few bit of these after, like, the MVP gets released, but no promises right now. But yeah, it's just, so it's kind of, like, for some of the ramblings. One more thing I was gonna mention, I'm gonna save the ramble. We do have quite a bit of questions, so I might save this one after that.
Okay.
So Grant UK is asking, the issue with GitHub is a developer-centric website. While it's efficient for developers, it isn't very easy for developers to access. Would a triage system for non-team validators on forum be worth consideration? Also, a forum could be good for users to share things and coordinate meetups and communities. There probably are forum systems that are available. So there's actually a thing, like, we recommend people, like, you can use the Discord because it has a forum feature. You can make a post and coordinate and, submit it to GitHub eventually. I understand, like, the GitHub is like a developer-centric website, but we need it as developers, because it makes our work efficient and our time is very limited. So if you wanted, like, us, like, us as developer, like, look at it like from this perspective. Say if we switch to, like, less efficient system for developers, now we're only able to handle, like, half of the issues. We get less work done. Is that something you would prefer? I feel that's, it's not the right approach here. What I think is the best is, we keep the GitHub as developers, but we build things around it. We provide, like, nicer UI, which doesn't require, like, GitHub account, like, we just have, like, an integration, where, like, on the Resonite dash, you have, like, create an issue and you type things in, but it's gonna pipe it into GitHub. Definitely forums would help. We might consider something, that's more formalized. We tell people, like, report things here and so on, but that's a little bit more involved because we will need people to actually go there and, you know, make sure the issues are like, you know, somebody ends up making the GitHub issue from it. So that kind of requires like, do we provide staff for it? Like, you know, do we ask like, you know, our volunteers, you know, to like help people with issues, because then they have to like, you know, have like a time commitment? Or do we tell people you can make an issue there, you can ask for somebody to help, but we cannot give you any guarantees, you know, if the, you know, post you make doesn't end up with a GitHub issue, we might not even know about it, because like, you know, we're not gonna like, you know, look through everything like in the long discussions there. So it's something we kind of talked about. Like I feel like we might like, you know, do something along those lines, but there's like there's definitely like, you know, a number of kind of complications with that, and like how do we kind of approach it the best. Next we have
question. Sorry, I was just saying I like it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so Skyrim Kitsune is asking, I didn't meant to do that. Skyrim Kitsune is asking, how are you planning to implement the rigid body physics on Resonite? I mean, so the details of that are kind of gonna depend once we actually do it. Because generally when big things get implemented, a big part of the implementation is a design phase. Oh, actually, everything is a design phase. And that's part of the process where when I do it myself, I essentially sit down with my, like, you know, OneNote and I start sketching things out. I'm like, it could work this way, it could work this way. What if it works this way? If I make it work this way, this causes these problems, so I need to change design here. But if I change design here, then there's this other problem. And I just kind of go through all the, you know, possible ways to like approach something and be like, can it handle this? Is it going to handle this well? And I keep like kind of going at it until I find like a design that I'm confident with, that like that is like, you know, that kind of makes a design that makes sense, and that also like feel is gonna be able to be like a solid foundation for the future, like something that we can actually, you know, keep building on top of. So generally, like, you know, details for that are gonna, you know, depend once we actually get to this part. I can tell you in general parts, you know, what I'm kind of thinking right now, like, but like, you know, this is subject to change. It's very likely gonna be a system, you know, where you essentially add certain components, you know, for example, like rigid body physics and so on, that's gonna drive, you know, some things like position, you know, rotation of the object, and then it's gonna use, it's gonna be like registered with another system that's gonna handle the synchronization for those. And instead of like, you know, just synchronizing the positions to raw, it'll like encode them efficiently using like, you know, quantization, delta changes, you know, and so on. So it's probably gonna be something along those lines. There's like more complications because it might need extra data. Like, for example, if you have like, you know, physics option, say we're throwing it back and forth, you want to decide, you know, who's the authority, who's like the one driving this, and have a system where like where it kind of hands it off and resolves any conflicts and stuff like that. So there's probably going to be a number of things with that, but again, the details are going to be determined, like, you know, when we actually kind of work on it. If you have like more specific question with it, like, you know, feel free to ask, like, follow up, but that's pretty much what I can tell you right now.
I was just gonna say that like networking rigid body physics and stuff is like still a very active field in like figuring out how to do it best in computer science, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a particularly difficult problem. Like the networking part is like the harder part of it, I would say. We're definitely like one of the reasons we also want to like, you know, do the big performance update with switch to .NET 9 is because the Beppo physics, it's specifically designed for it. So when we do introduce rigid body physics, we want to be as performant as possible, and the switch, you know, of the client makes it easier. We also kind of diverged a little bit from main, you know, version of Beppo physics right now, because it now, like, they have made a change where it only works with the .NET, you know, I forget which version is it right now, like, but essentially only works with the newer versions of .NET, which means we cannot even use it, like the newer versions of it. Once we make the switch to .NET 9 for the Froox engine, we'll be able to, you know, sync up to the latest version. We're gonna get like, you know, hugely improved performance, And then we can be like, do we want to do the rigid body physics now? We're going to resolve the networking, and we're going to handle the integration. So that itself is going to, help a lot, because if we did it right now, it might not be as, performant. So like it's better to like, do the performance first and, and then plan it sometime after. I know like Sarah, like you've been doing like a lot of tests like with headless, where you have the physics simulated on the headless and you have like lots of the bodies.
Yes.
And even like, with the current like way we handle like networking, like it's just kind of like synchronizes the position like every frame. It still works really fast, like with the .NET like 8 headless.
Like I think I simulated maybe like 900 or so, like just even like character controllers, just like floating around and like bumping into each other in like a giant conglomerate like ball of like almost liquid, because it almost behaves like liquid at that point. And like on mono, even the newest version of mono, it just like died. It like exploded and went down to like 15 FPS and it was unplayable. And on .NET 8, and now probably .NET 9 as well, I could do it at 60 FPS and the server didn't even flinch. In fact, the networking gave out before the physics gave out.
Oh yeah. It's also like why the networking is like a really big part of it, because like it's a huge amount of data. So like that needs to be something that's like, very efficient. You can just have like, the system kind of synchronize it naively, but like the essential efficiency becomes a problem. But like that kind of showcases, like both like the huge difference in performance, between Mono and like .NET, and also like, how Beppu physics is like, optimized for it, because it uses a lot of it kind of, primitives and things to like run really fast. And there was even like, older version that was before that. So like, the newer versions are probably even way more optimized. So once we're able to switch to those, like it's gonna be beautiful.
The new versions of .NET are just so much faster, dude. Like it's just gonna be several orders of magnitude.
That actually, like, it kind of ties into like the other Ramble I was gonna have, because it's a relatively short one. I think I already mentioned this earlier in the stream, but like I've upgraded like I've upgraded like Skyfer's like the API and the worker to .9, and literally no other change in code other than like fixing a small method call, and like the performance usage actually drops like visibly. Like we literally just going from .NET 8 to .NET 9, we got free performance. Like every year they just made so many performance optimizations, and that's like one of the reasons like we want to keep using the latest version, because it's faster and like it keeps getting faster. So next one we have VT Arxelos is asking, when is Froox? Now. Erasmus 0211 is asking, what is Photon Dust? Photon Dust is a name for our new in-house particle system that's being currently developed. It's getting close to MVP. I kind of expected like hopefully next week. I was kind of hoping this week, but like some things were a little bit more complicated. So hopefully next week, like we can kind of start testing it. It's going to replace the current system that's sort of like a hybrid between Unity and Froox engine into one that's pretty much fully Froox engine. And that's part of our like big performance optimization. We actually did like cover a fair bit of this like on the last stream too, like if you want to check. Also, thank you, Dirky, for another cheer for another 20 bits.
Thank you.
So next question we have the Jeb Forge is asking, can protoflags detect infinite loops yet? Running infinite while loop that just freezes the game forever. So a bit pedantic answer is nothing can detect infinite loops. This is known as the halting problem, and it's been proven by Alan Turing. This is fundamentally unsolvable problem. You cannot detect like if code has infinite loops. What protoflags does, it places a time limit on how long can your code execute per frame. If it takes too long, it essentially forces it to break and just stops your code. The problem is it has no way to tell if it's legitimately just taking while processing something and it would eventually finish, or if it's actually infinite loop, because actually detecting that it's fundamentally impossible. But yeah, like there's a system that should break it. The only thing is when it breaks it, it crashes the world because there's I haven't like wrapped around it yet because with the early versions of the protoflags or pretty much anything, whenever I'm implementing something big, I follow this philosophy of called fail fast. And what you do is like you write your code, like when something goes wrong, you just make it visibly explode as fast as possible. Because when you do, then you'd be like, okay, there's an issue, I'm gonna fix it. Whereas if you ignore problems more silently, they can kind of fester and like, they kind of stay there for too long before you even notice them. Like we've had problems that literally existed for years in Froox engine that were kind of hidden because they were silently ignored. And it took like, complicated set of circumstances for them to like even, come to the surface. So like the fail fast kind of makes things like fast, but like at certain point, like once the system's like used, like, we want to wrap it because we want to improve the user experience. Be like, okay, like you might freeze for a few seconds and then your code is, gonna get angry and be like, I took too long to execute. Next we have ShadowX. Will particle support subparticles? Particles themselves being emitters in foreseeable future. So yes, I introduced a little bit earlier. Sub-emitters is one of the things I do want to add to the particle system. I am not planning it to add for MVP, because like it's not needed for it and it's a little bit more complicated. It requires a synchronization mechanism, like where like, one of the particle systems need to finish simulation first and pass on its data to the other one. But I might, I don't guarantee right now, but like I might maybe add it after MVP, like depending, I'll see like how I feel about it, because I've been kind of working on it for a while. It's gonna come at some point. It's much easier to add, now that we have actually our own system, but I don't know when yet. Definitely like one thing like that that's gonna have like a lot of cool effects. I was gonna mention that in my ramble earlier. One of the things that's also gonna be cool, like with the trail system, is you can have the trails be emitters. So as the particle is drawing a trail, that trail can be emitting other particles. So like there's gonna be a lot of kind of cool possibilities. The main thing we just need is like a way for the simulation system to be, don't simulate this particle system until this system gives it data. And it kind of becomes more complicated if you're like, okay, there's two systems that can subemit into this system, so now it needs to count how many it needs to do. And then you have a question, what happens if like you have a circular reference? Do you just like, not allow that? Because it just like leads to infinite particles, like you just be like, okay, I'm gonna break it, this is not valid. Or do you like just make it like, break at certain point and like then wait for the next simulation step? Like there's some kind of like, things to resolve there. But yeah, it'll be supported at some point. XX Choreo XX is asking, doing well. We're doing pretty okay. Darky Saberfood, have you eaten today? Just being a derp. Yes, I had food like a little bit before this.
I've been actually eating cereal while this has been going on.
Well, this is eating as we speak. Well, at least as I speak. Hopefully you're not speaking as you eat.
No,
or eating as you speak.
I finished it.
Oh, there we go. Dust to Sprinkles, have you done any thinking about upcoming data model rework in any way? Yeah, quite a bit. I do have like a lot of notes. I do have like a general idea how it's going to work, how it's going to be approached. It's mostly just a matter, it's just like, mostly matter just putting work into it, because it's going to be bigger work. And we need to make sure like, things don't explode. We need to update pretty much every single component, and so there's probably going to be like, cell automation and so on. Next we have Tiki 8192 is asking, does it allow the work to switch .NET version? I'm asking because .NET 9 is not long-term support. So we already had this question earlier in the stream, but just to quickly reiterate, no, it pretty much it took less than a day. Once .NET 10 comes out, we expect like, to just switch very quickly. The thing that takes the longest is mostly just kind of giving people, who run headless, giving the time to like, update their tooling, make sure like, that doesn't explode. But the switch is mostly just literally flipping the version and things just kind of work. There was like one little piece of code I had to update and it just works. And it's free performance. Slide of Floof. Is there any updates regarding source project? Right now I don't have like any updates. You could like check Ginz's office hours whenever like he hosts them. But there's like no update right now that I can give you. I said thank you for the cheer. Thank you. VT Arx was also asking, does the cereal have a flavor?
Yes, actually, I was eating Fruit Loops.
Fruit.
I'm sorry, Froox. I'm sorry. They're too yummy.
Can't say that. What is this? And that's all the questions again. So we have 25 minutes left before the 2 hours. I suppose we could do more rambling. Or this, whatever this is.
I don't know. How do I talk to people? Where are you people?
How does one Froox? I don't know. You just make noises and eat fruit.
You make noises. You be yellow, and you put your face on the keyboard, and a game comes out. Or
Yeah,
something.
you just go like you take keyboard and just go like blah 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 blah, and then like this happens.
Yeah.
How does one blow bubbles? First, you have to find a delicious soap. You eat it, you just go, and then you go like, bah.
Yep.
Just like that. That's the best way. I recommend glycerin soap because glycerin-based soaps, they actually taste sweet. Most other soaps taste bitter.
We do not recommend eating soap, though.
Just lick it,
Well,
and then wash your mouth.
Maybe he does, but I don't. I don't think you should eat soap.
No, don't actually eat soap. We're being silly. But yeah. Well, now question is like, what do we ramble about?
I don't know. I mean, I've been trying to get my VR working on Linux lately, I guess.
Oh, how's the going? This is exploding.
It's actually pretty cool. I got my Quest Pro working pretty easily. It's actually getting pretty good.
Ah. I'm kind of like in a stage where I'm like I wish I could. I kind of want to like switch away from Windows because it's just giving me so many issues and it feels like it's getting worse. Like it feels like you're kind of focusing on things and it's like, but at the same time, like I tried like running Linux, on my laptop and it killed the Wi-Fi adapter. So I'm like, okay, I don't know when I'm trying to like.
Well, I. To clarify, is it permanently broken or did it just like make it stop working for a sec?
Well, I need to like, I had to like do a hard power cycle. Like I started Linux, it was actually Arch Linux, and I was with Glitch. Glitch uses Arch Linux. It was booting, and then Glitch goes, oh, that's weird. I've never seen it make that error during boot before. Something with Wi-Fi.
Oh,
and then like boot back into Windows, and Wi-Fi adapter's gone. So I tried to like, also I'm getting the corner again. So I like, I tried to like, I tried rebooting, I tried installing the drivers, I tried doing, a bunch of things, it just doesn't want to come back. And I'm like, it's just gone. Like, it just doesn't even see it. So eventually I had to like, find like, oh, there's a like way to do like hard power cycle on the laptop if I hold the button for like 2 minutes. And like, then it actually came back, but I'm like, not sure when I want to try it again because I don't know. So problem for me is like when I use like whenever Windows like does something like like I'm like I don't want to be dealing with computer issues. I want to be working on the stuff I want to be working on, and every like minute like I spend like working on like trying to resolve a problem, I'm just like I don't want to deal with this, and that kind of makes it more difficult for me to use Linux because I'm like I don't want to be dealing with this. I just want it to work. Like I have like already like too much things I need to kind of do, and I don't want like I want as much time to be able to spend working through that. and not just making my stuff work. And for sure that's like still like one of the benefits of like Windows. It, like in most of the time it just kind of works, at least for me. So
Yes,
it's
It seems in recent times it's getting a little more. It just doesn't work.
like it so it's for me, it's like right now it's still like where it works. It's just there's a lot of things that kind of like are super annoying and like to deal with.
Yeah.
But I also got a bunch more questions in the meanwhile. Dark is Saberfruit. So what will be Froox's scented soap on the store? That's Chroma. VT Arxel is asking refrigerant.
Refrigerant?
Refrigerant is. I don't know what it means.
It. I think.
I think the answer is 7.
Yes.
7.
I think you just answered this one on the
yeah, like
next Windows Fruit expect you'll switch.
When it just works, DM.
when his Wi-Fi card works.
Yeah, when my Wi-Fi card works and other stuff works. That's okay, Mirror. Really glitch uses actually looks wild. Let me answer that in a form of a thing if I can find it. If I remember where I saved it, I have. This is also like one of the things. I'm like, I know I saved a thing somewhere. Oh, there we go. Oh, this might be the wrong one. This might be the wrong one. This one's a bit modified. Just gotta put it over there. But yeah, like sometimes I'm like, like I get like the things like where I'm like, I want to work on everything, but I can only work on one thing because like whenever I'm like looking for something in inventory, I'm like, I just want to rework the inventory. I want to add a search, so I can just like not deal with this, but I'm like, can only do so many things.
That's something I realized.
So
like
I suffer with everyone else.
That's something I've kind of realized too. Now that I've like started this internship, is that there's just not enough time to do anything, man. Like,
yeah,
like, I want to do all this stuff. I need to do this, but then I need to like actually do my job, and it's just like, oh my god.
that's been the problem. Like for me, like I've got so many things I wanted to work on, and it's not time. And it's kind of like just to kind of bring up what I was discussing before. It's like what we're sometimes like really strict, like on the GitHub like stuff, because we're like, why do you have like too many things to deal with? The best thing you can do to help us, as a developers, is like make our work as easy as possible, because then that way, like we can handle, like we're still not gonna be able to handle everything, but we're gonna be able to handle a lot more. And it kind of gets difficult because sometimes it's like this person's not giving me like the stuff I need, which means this probably, instead of taking 5 minutes, it's gonna take me an hour, and I'm like, I don't have an hour to spend right now. If you gave me the information, if it was there, I probably would have resolved this now, but now I have to put it back on the shelf and deal with it later maybe. And figure out like is this an issue that's worth an hour of time? It gets difficult. Like there's never enough time for everything, and if they kind of figure out like where you spend your time most efficiently. So we have like 15 minutes left and a few more questions, so I'm gonna let's see. Shadow X is asking, what's your opinion on varifocal hardware in headsets? How it work with rendering wise? Do you think it will be a big improvement to realism or eye health? I don't really know. Like I haven't actually tried varifocal hardware, so like I can't really comment on this one much. I don't know, sorry, have you tried any varifocal headsets?
No, I haven't tried any fancier headsets than like a Quest Pro. I really would like to try some new VR hardware, but I'm very sad that the VR landscape is a little barren right now.
Yeah, I have high hopes for Deckard. I'm also prepared for those hopes to be crushed, but I do have them.
I have no I have no expectations whatsoever. I need it in my hands.
That's
I
also
need a
fair.
real VR headset. I need
Yeah,
a real one.
the real one. With textures, I know what was the recent. I don't know what it was in context with.
I think that might have been in response to someone else. I'm not sure.
Dark Saber Froox, Resonite on my closest one, joking. I mean, eventually would like to get there, but no specific timeline.
Technically, you can run it through some emulation software, but it doesn't really
Yes.
work with skin mesh renders.
Yeah. VT Arxelos, 1.5. Oh, that's chat within chat. Dark Saber phone will there ever be a genuine phone app, the way people can send messages to each other without even being on the PC? Yeah, that's actually one of the things I would like us to have, is, have like a sort of thing on your phone. You can, message people, you can send them things, you can like manage things to inventory, like say like you take a picture and it just automatically saves it to inventory, and you jump on VR, be like, oh hey, let me show you the thing I took, and it's right there. So I would like us to have like, sort of like a companion app, like, and eventually even like, be able to like, be in sessions, like, like simple enough. But no like, specific timeline or something like that. I as a joke, Shadow Lupus Wolf, why should they not fart in Apple Store? Because they don't have Windows.
Yeah, alright.
Now we're at fart jokes. Darky Sabertor, he's glitch for out of a window. He doesn't use Windows. He doesn't have them either. It's just delete him at the wall. Delete him at the wall. It's just too hard. VT Arxels is out. Oh, it's also views it, progress. Something else. Shadow X, possible controller has been found. Data mining. Apparently, the car controls will feature ABXY buttons and D-pad, and a bumper addition to trigger. How do you utilize that layout in Resonite? More buttons. More buttons are good. Probably like map some. Like I have to like say it because right now it's like data mining, so it's kind of like could be other things. Like I don't want to like. But generally, the more buttons there is, we can just map things to them. That's actually one of the issues I had is, like figuring out button mappings for things. It's like, there's not enough buttons for all the things people, like, would like to have. Because sometimes we get requests like, oh, like, we want like button for this, and like, we're like, well, this button's already used for this button's already used for that. We could like, make it like, make this button do multiple things, but then it becomes difficult, for people, because you have to be like, oh, to use function 1, you have to, hold it for as many seconds, and then like, release it. To use this other function, you have to double tap it, and that makes it kind of difficult for new users. It's a tricky thing. So like, just having more buttons helps. It makes kind of, I feel like it's kind of like allows like simpler controls. I actually had like the issue, like the worst, the controller that was the worst about it was the original Vivance, because you only have one button, you have the touchpad, and the touchpad you have to press it, to like be able to use the axis. And it's actually one of the reasons why this is like a common problem, but like when you equip like a developer tooltip, you end up with tongue controls with certain controllers, and the Vivans are the reason why. Because on the Vivans, you cannot like, use the click without also like, using the movement, because like they're like very tied together. With the joysticks, you can. So it kind of like, you can kind of click it independently of like moving around. But like it's with the Vivans, like like it has to work with those, so this kind of makes things like difficult, and it's kind of tied to that. So like we have systems that still like work with those. Next, Yoru, sorry. I guess if Resonite were native with Super Vulkan, the performance on Linux would be better. I mean, probably like, well, I mean. So there's like a lot to that, because if you just naively switch to Vulkan, you might not automatically, get like extra performance. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It depends a lot, like, how the engine's structured. However, we plan to switch to a sort of custom rendering engine that's gonna use Vulkan. So we can expect that provide performance benefits, but there's gonna be also a lot of other reasons for it. One of them using more efficient method of rendering instead of deferred, using something called clustered forward. Which has low overhead, is able to render lots of lights in real time, and also work with any materials. For example, right now, I'm using a toon shader, and I'm being affected by this light. There's another light there. What engine actually has to do, it cannot use deferred because that only works for opaque PBR materials. So for this one, it actually has to use forward, which means this mesh, it gets re-rendered for each of these lights, where each one of them has light contribution, and that ends up taking a fair bit of performance. But with clustered forward, you can actually sort of pre-compute, you pre-compute areas where there's lights, and then when you render the individual fragments of the mesh, it just loops through all the lights within that, within that point in space, and just does it all in one go.
We should probably stop questions since we're 10 minutes out or so.
Yeah, we have about 9 minutes left. And we can do a little bit more rambling. If there's simple enough questions, we can answer them. But if there's a lot of questions at this point, we're probably not going to be able to get through them. So feel free to still ask questions. We'll try to get through as many as we can. But at this point, no guarantees your question's gonna be answered. Kendrick is asking, Snop it? I have no idea what that means, so I'm gonna answer with 7.
That's like a Tom Scott video.
Oh.
Where he's like, Snop it?
Snop it? Snop it?
Snop it?
But yeah. I forget what I was rambling about before. I was mentioning the .NET 9 thing. Because that's it's actually one of the cool things. I remember I think when .NET 7 released, that was 2 years ago. Oh no, Kedin is asking, hey Froox, can you recite approximately 9 minutes worth of certain items of service? The answer is no. I mean, it's a valid answer to the question. But they released the performance updates, and it was so long. When we tried to open it, web browser on their phone, it would crash it just because of how ridiculously long that is. And the author, who writes these, they were saying when they started, making those performance kind of summarization updates, they got kind of worried. They were we're getting so many performance updates for Netcore 1, Netcore 2, Netcore 3. We're gonna, we're gonna go through all the possible performance updates and then I'll have nothing to write about. And then they were every single year there's more of them. And they essentially were I think by Net 5 they were I'm not worried about it anymore. And I think they even purposefully made it so long just to be there's so much. And in the latest one for Net 9, it's also super long. And they're I think they said some at the beginning they say something I'm both looking forward to writing these and also dreading it because it's gonna be so long. Froox, can you describe your favorite movie backwards without saying the name of the movie? Well, you see, the problem there is I generally don't answer questions what's your favorite thing very well, because I like different things for different reasons. So it's I always find it difficult to be yeah, that is my favorite. That is my favorite. It kind of depends and it changes over time. So I can't for that reason, and not because it's the backwards thing.
Yeah, I really like in C# 13, which is the language version that you can use with Net 9 now. They allow spans and stuff in async methods, which is really nice.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I've actually run into that a few times. I was writing something, was oh, you cannot use span, with an async method. I'm oh, but I want to.
I want to. Stack allocated data.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things you can do. You cannot do stack alloc in those. That's the thing. I know you can. Glitch for will Resonite. When will Resonite support serial connections? You know, the funny thing is,
Technically,
like at one point I kind of had urge to just write it because one of the things with Resonite, like the way it handles networking, like we haven't abstracted like networking support, so it becomes relatively easy to add new networking modules. And one thing I want to do at some point, like, is sort of like open and even more modularize the system, but you can actually have like plugins which add additional networking protocol supports. I feel once that happens, it's only going to be a question of time before somebody writes a serial, connection support so you can host, on serial. Like a while back, like we were kind of dealing with some like business things. I ended up like adding TCP protocol support because it was just easy to do. It took like literally like 2 hours. I don't remember. I think it took
yeah.
less than half a day to implement. So like, and I had like the urge to just do it, for the lols. But I feel like once we do open it, if we don't do it, for the fun of it, somebody's gonna do it.
All right, I need networking over my sound card.
I mean, you could do that too. I mean, networking over the CPU cache. I mean, technically with the TCP, I mean, we do have the TCP, so like if you use something that like, has like TCP over serial, then you can use it. There's also like
Yeah.
TCP over CPU cache, like with the, with the Spectre and Meltdown things.
Networking via RF emissions from your system bus.
Oh no. I mean, technically, since we also have TCP, there's also TCP over carrier pigeons, so like you can use carrier pigeons for Resonite, but problem is your connection is gonna time out. Or will it? Actually, not it won't, because you can have a custom timeout. DJ Prodigy Hunters, why a yellow dog? Well, I'm not a dog, I'm some sort of sci-fi space fox wolf-like sort of thing. I'm very specifically non-specific. But it's kind of a long story and we don't have answer for like we don't have time for it. Maybe sometime else. VT Arxelus. It made clear to support serial connections, but it supports serial connections. I mean,
Yummy.
I don't think it does. Like Sarah had like serial to himself and had like none of that.
Yeah, I don't think my connection improved any.
Jenny K. Will file writing note it will be brought out experimental out and out of private LAN sessions. Maybe hard permissions are a thing. Probably not. With things like that, like that's very, very dangerous node. So like we're gonna be very careful about it. Maybe like if we like. The question is how do we like approach, because what we'd probably do, it would work differently. Like the way I can see it work is like where like if you're making something, it makes a request that appears in user space to the user, be like, this thing wants to access this folder on your system. Do you grant it permission or not? So you have to specifically give permission, and it can only access those specific things. And maybe like it's even more scope. It's gonna be like it's gonna have access to all the files in there, or it only has access to make new files but not read anything else. So maybe that way.
Yeah.
Like that's I'm very kind of cautious like with those kinds of things, because like that can be abused very easily when there's a hole. Because even
Yeah.
with hard permissions, if there's a bug that lets you get around something, most of the time the most you can do is you mess up the world, but like the worst, like that's not as severe as being to like access somebody's file system, because that's kind of that leaks outside of Resonite and lets you like install Trojans, like, and do other things. So like that puts it at like a lot of different level of scrutiny.
I've had situations in Gary's mod where I was using I had used someone's E2 in the world, and it wrote like 500,000 garbage text files to my data folder. Where it was scoped to only be able to write to, but they had no limit on writing how many files. They could just write 50,000 files.
And just clog your system.
Yep.
There's a lot of kind of like bit holes. So like with stuff like that, like definitely, like if we do support it, it's gonna be something along those lines. It's gonna ask you, for permission to specific thing. There's gonna be a limit, how much you can read, like write. stuff like that. But that's not a now thing right now. Also, we're pretty much like in the last 30 seconds, so like thank you everyone, for joining the second episode. I hope like you enjoyed like us talking about stuff, like answering questions, talking about Resonite. I'm gonna upload like the video like on YouTube again, so you can watch this afterwards. Like or like if you like missed it, well, if you missed it and you're watching this on YouTube right now, like like I guess like that's kind of redundant to say you've just watched the whole thing, maybe. I don't know, but thank you everyone for joining. Thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you for like supporting Resonite. Thank you for making cool things on Resonite. Thanks Sairo, for co-hosting.
Of course,
And we'll see you like next week. So thank you very much,
See you around,
and
guys.
see you later. Bye.
Bye.
I'm also gonna do a thing that like the moment I ended the stream last time, I was like, I should have rated Creator Jam, so I'm gonna all of you are going to Creator Jam now. Actually, wait, they're not streaming anymore.
Oh no. Oh,
Wait,
well.
hold on. Let me double check. Twitch is giving me error. Maybe they're streaming. They're not streaming. They stopped streaming. Okay,
Oh.
nobody's getting rated. You don't have to go home, but like you can stay here. Bye.
Bye.